Hello and good. My name is James Robson and I'm Honorary Secretary of the Classical Association. And I'm really delighted to be here this evening. We've got such a great evening in store for you. When we first floated the idea of holding a mini CA conference online, someone used the phrase Festival of Classics. And so I thought, of course, immediately theatre. We have to put the show on right here, right? And I had this fully formed vision in my mind automatically of all my favorite Greek theatre people in one virtual place. And tonight, this vision becomes a reality through the magic of technology. So I really couldn't be more thrilled. Of course, the events of the last 12 months have hit the performing arts particularly hard. There's the financial impact, but also the fact that actors, musicians, creatives, and audiences have largely been deprived of face-to-face performances. So it's wonderful to be able to celebrate the work of all those involved in theatre and who have made it possible to enjoy ancient theatre even during lockdown. And it's also wonderful to look forward to what we hope are better days to come and for some packed theatres and face-to-face events. So for tonight, I enthusiastically invited 3 companies along to talk about classical theatre online and offline for that matter. And I'm delighted to say that all 3 of them said yes almost immediately, which means I get to be a complete fanboy introducing you to an amazing cast of speakers and actors and creatives this evening. Okay, so just one more thing before I introduce our first company, which is the structure. So each company has got a section of about 20 minutes in turn, and there are 3 in total, which makes an hour. You're ahead of me there with the maths, I hope. And at the end, we'll have about 15 or 20 minutes for questions. So do put these in the boxes. You have a discussion forum, one of the buttons along the bottom of your screen, and you also have a live Q&A button as well. So that's where to pop your questions for people later. So the first company to introduce is Barefaced Greek. Barefaced Greek is a film company whose work focuses on producing high quality extracts of Greek theatre in the original language. If you haven't checked out their website, then do so. There is lots of great stuff to discover there and to share with fellow classicists and students. And we have along with us tonight Helen Eastman, who I've known for a long time, who's just involved in so many projects, but maybe known to classicists most recently through the Cambridge Greek play with which she was associated for a few years. I saw a wonderful lysistrature a few years ago. The person who composed the music for that, I believe, was Alex Silverman, who we have with us tonight. And we also have Maureen O'Hagan, who I've had the pleasure to meet at a similar session in the past, and who stars in their amazing Lysistrata extract. So I'm really looking forward to this session. Over to Barefaced Greek and Helen.
Thank you very much, James. I'm utterly thrilled to be to have you in our fanboy club and to be amongst your favourite people in Greek theatre. And it's a real privilege to be here. And if you have been following us on social media, the rumours are true. We are here tonight to share a brand new film with you. And in the last half of our 20-minute session, we'll be premiering a brand new film based on the first chorus of Oedipus, which we've made over the last month, and I'm really excited about sharing it. The initial idea for setting up Barefaced Greek and making films in original language came around the time that I finished a stint as the guest director of the Cambridge Greek play. During that 6 years, I got to direct Agamemnon, Prometheus, Frogs, Antigone, Lysistrata, all in the original language. I was absolutely sort of intoxicated by the dramatic energy that you could unlock from the sound and the meter of the original texts, and I definitely felt I still had unfinished business with working in the original language and a desire to share that much more widely. Also from an outreach perspective, my sister was running a classics club in a Hackney secondary school and asked my advice on what to show her students, some clips, some extracts. She joked about, you know, when you would show Baz Luhrmann in a Shakespeare session, what do I show in my classics club? And a lot of the stuff I could find for her was actually film of theatre. Myself, I'd filmed a lot of theatre shows that I'd made. And that works up to a point, but when you've got teenagers who have never been to the theatre, and sadly, when you're doing outreach in secondary schools, you realise the unfathomably large number of children in the UK who've never been to the theatre. It's just another barrier, because if you've been to the theatre, you can sort of reconstruct what that experience is of sitting in a theatre and watching a filmed theatre show. But if you haven't, it's another barrier to being able to sort of access that material. So we wanted to make some stuff that was actually made directly for film, and to make some short films. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Maureen, the co-director of Barefaced Greek, who's going to tell you a little bit about the journey so far and the films we've made to date.
Hello. We're about to share with you some of our highlights from the various films we've made, but I'll just give you a quick overview. So the first few films we made were with a great deal of support from the APGRD at Oxford, and that coincided with the V&A inviting us to come and make a film there and have an installation. So our first trio of films was shown at the V&A, and it was The Watchman from Agamemnon, which we shot on a rooftop in London in the night of November, with some very lucky fireworks coming our way to help feature as beacons. We also were really lucky to get to make a film overnight in the V&A Museum, which was Poseidon and Athena. It was the opening of Trojan Women. And we used real fleshy humans to play gods, and got to take our pick of all the amazing statues around the V&A to play our human beings. And along with that, we kind of hurried together a Lysistrata, which was in response to the Trump-inspired women's marches that were going on around the world. And we used knitwear, you might see some of it later, as our kind of symbol of protest in that film. Since then, we've finished another Agamemnon film, The Return, which looked at kind of the experience of war and homecoming, using flashbacks, which is quite fun, a departure from sort of more traditional theatre options. And then we got really lucky and got invited out to Greece. So we did a couple of films with the Hydrama arts theatre company there, and were invited to make some films on Hydra, which is an island covered in donkeys. And so our first thought, of course, was to include donkeys. And we did the opening of The Frogs, and we kind of explored more Greek comedy, and the opening of, again, Trojan Women, another opening, with Hecuba. This time we were making films with native Greek speakers, so we were sort of exploring the differences of pronunciation there. And then the last film that we got to make before the pandemic was with the University of British Columbia, and so we were rehearsing in Canada, again with Alex, and looking at chorus work. So we have an amazing chorus film which we got to make in Greece, yet again, which is not include, which you will see a snippet of just now.
Teus, and I to ton la paragen pornon, pluras, teas mekos, hen koi momenos, stegais a tre donan katen, kunos deken.
Proton mena argos, kaithet usen horius, dike prosepen.
Ei potiton, ei ofotono despota. Epois ai geloshin poi teomenoi.
Netondir, otibuli.
Ototuxes tai makraten kepalen. Polemos dandresi melese.
Eko lipon agaion chalmuron, bathos pontu Poseidon. Tidode pedras alot eis alustropus. Miseis telian kai philes honantuches.
Uk oist hubres deisan.
Ola tantreina, kuderan tropu denoteron pele, tuto kai poliu peran motu, kemerion oto, kore Ukiti Troia. Da de kai Basiles esmen Troias. Mater dosetis tanois ornisen hopos exarxogo. Klangan, molpan, utan, autan, hoian potide sceptro priam. Diare domina, podos arche choru plegais frugius, eu compois exerchon teus.
Thank you very much. I'm glad we got that playing. So if you want to watch any of those films, you can do so by going to the Barefaced Greek website, or you can go to the Barefaced Greek YouTube channel. We didn't subtitle those tiny clips, but on the YouTube channel, they're all subtitled. And due to an amazing project at the University of British Columbia, they're actually subtitled into about 15 different languages. So you can subtitle them in French or German or Thai, and which means they can be used educationally anywhere because they're in the original Greek, and you can watch them with any language subtitles. And we're very grateful. That was an amazing project, getting classics graduates who were bilingual to translate the subtitles into lots of different languages. So when lockdown hit, we were in fact collaborating with a second film with the University of British Columbia of intended to be of the Phaethon chorus, the fragmentary chorus that exists. The great thing about making short films is that you can use a fragment. You don't need the whole of the text. And we were literally singing that text and rehearsing it prior to shooting in Galaxidi when the world closed down around us. And Alex Silverman, our brilliant composer, and I were hustled towards an airport and got out, I think, on the last flight from Canada back to the UK. So that project was interrupted, and our plan today had been to share that film with you and to share some new work, but of course that film hasn't been made yet. So we decided about a month ago that it was a total cop-out not to share some new work, and we started to think about the ways we might make a film during lockdown. And while obviously the easiest thing to do perhaps might have been to make a monologue film or something that was, easily achievable in that way, it was far more interesting to think about what chorality might mean in this new fragmented world, and what a choral film might look like if nobody in it could be in the same place as anybody else or within 2 meters of anyone else. And we also became really interested in the new aesthetics of mask. Obviously, we have now become a mask-wearing culture, and that is aesthetically and conceptually quite an interesting place to find ourselves. So we decided we would make a film in lockdown with all the participating performers in separate spaces, using a mixture of self-taping and Zoom, and exploring chorality and the aesthetics of the mask. And we looked at various texts for that and went full circle from our first instinct, which was to look at the first chorus of Oedipus, it being about being under plague, and then we went all around the houses looking at lots of other texts and came back to Oedipus, at which point I made a kind of mad map of what a film of the first chorus of Oedipus might look like, also taking a few lines from the preceding speech from the priest, and started to collaborate with Alex on what the meters and sounds of that text might be doing. So over to Alex Silverman, who's going to talk a bit about the meters and sounds of the first chorus of Oedipus and playing with them during a pandemic.
Thank you, Helen, and good evening, everyone out there. I'm a composer and increasingly also and Helen's given me the delightful brief of talking briefly about meter, but don't go and get a gin and tonic now. Meter is important. It was the reason I'm here, really, and it holds the key, I think, to 2 related questions, which will arise maybe when you see our new film. Those questions are, how do you go about turning 70 lines of Oedipus Tyrannos into a film? And why have you made what appears to be an ancient Greek music video? The answers to both of those questions lie absolutely in the meter. That is the thing that hits you as soon as you read a line of a tragic chorus out loud in the original language, which I know the sort of people who attend the Classical Association conference on a Wednesday evening, you do that all the time. The meter, it's an echo of ancient dramatic music, and it's embedded right there in the text, which is the thing that we love working with, which is to say the meter is the music. The choraloids are songs. Of course, we're making music videos in ancient Greek. It would actually be harder, I think, to film these pieces if we use no music at all. How do we go about it? Helen's talked about her mad map. The way we go about turning that into a film, well, we start with scansion, believe it or not. We do as all good for our metrical pencils, and we look at the rhythm of individual lines and of the verses. We compare how they flow, how they compare to one another. It's looking under the bonnet, really, to get an idea of the shape of the whole ode, and how we're going to pace our storytelling. So thinking about this, the paradox of the OT, of this particular chorus that you're going to see, what we've got is 3 pairs of strophes, which the way they develop and the way they compare rhythmically, it sets the whole pace of this film up really for us. The first pair are crammed with dactyls going dum diddy dum diddy dum diddy, which is exactly what I'll be doing if the sound doesn't work on the next video. By the way, you can just turn on my mic and I'll give you the rhythm. But it's quite pacey. It feels very close to speech rhythm at that point. And we felt quite strongly we didn't want to set every line to music in that passage. We wanted to allow it to flow with the spoken rhythm. And instead, what we've done is pulled out specific moments where the chorus are invoking a god or asking for help, and we've made a sort of textural bed whilst allowing the speech to create momentum for us. That drives us towards the second strophic pair, which are much heavier because there's stretched out sounds with oh, popoy and yeah, yawn, and lots of lovely vowel sounds. And that's kind of where I started composing the music for this piece. I wanted to use it as a basis for almost a blues, but certainly a lament. And it becomes the sung centerpiece of our film. And then there's a real gear change again into the third strophic pair, which are rhythmically very different. Lots of triplets. It wants to be set in almost a 6/8, like a jig time. It's faster. There's an element of something which you don't necessarily feel in the text, a tiny, tiny bit of hope or energized frustration. And I'm really just throwing ideas at you here. But the truth is that we look at all this just right underneath the words, if you like. This is before we even start discussing what the text does. The meter gives me a map as a musician that says, here's how you can structure a piece of music. And then we build everything on top of that. So on top of the rhythms, I start thinking about melody, start thinking about the bigger sonic picture. Helen starts to think about images, and we built this and eventually layer by layer to make the one piece that you're going to see this evening. Which is to say, the meter is where it starts. And I think when you see the end product, it's also very alive in the end as well. It's always been the thing that's drawn me to these texts as a musician. I want to work with a text that's inherently musical and to work with rhythmical material, which is unlike what I would have written for myself. And that keeps me coming back. So yes, more ancient Greek music videos I see in my future, but also actually in our future, because what we're discovering is that film is a brilliant way to explore this material, to push it. And I really hope you enjoy the one that's coming up this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Andy to share the film in 30 seconds. And before I do that, I'm just going to say a massive thank you to everyone who contributed to it. There's a lot of people involved, you will see. And this is absolutely a sort of preview, rough cut. We finished it yesterday. You're the first people who are going to get to watch it. We're then going to tidy it up a bit, tidy up the colour, polish the edit, check the subtitles, and it'll premiere on our YouTube channel on Friday, so please do look out for that. That'll be the public version, but this is our very first slightly rough and ready cut, and we're very excited to share it with you. So thank you for this opportunity, James, and everyone at the Classical Association. Over to Andy to play the film.
Polisgar, Foster Kautos Eisoras, Hagan Ede Saleur, Kanaku Fisai, Karabuthon et Ukhoya te Foiniu Salu, Dinusamen, Kaluxin en Karpois Ktonas, Dinusa dangerais Bunamois Tokoisi, te Agonois Gunaikon. And hopur foros theos, skepsas elaune. loimos ektistos olin.
O Dios hadue pespati, ispotetas por crusu puto nos agla asebas debas. Ectetamai poveran prena debati pallon, ie dalia paian amphisoi has dominos. Timoi en neon peter luminais horais palinexanuses reos. Epemoi o cruceas tecnomelpitos, ambro de pama. Protas ekeklomenos tiegeter dios ambrotatana. Gaia ochonta delpean artimin hacu cloenta gras tronen eucleatasse. Kai poibon hecabulon io. Trissoi aleximuroi profanete moi. Epotecai frotera sata superorium menas polei henius atectopian plogapemetos. Eltetecanium.
Endalakoi poliai tepimateres actam parabomion alloten alai, lugron ponon igeteres epistenacusi.
Paian del lampe, stone vessa de gerus omaulos honchiper, o crucea tucater dios, evo papem sonalcan.
Arreteton, maleron host, ljuda calcosas vinon, legene perigo etos antiaston. Calisuton granema motis aetatras, et puron etes megan, talabon ambitritas, etes tonan hox elon hormon, trecion ludona. Te vengaleti nuxa per, tute pema ecetai. Ton otan purpuron, astra pancratelemon, os deu paterus tison kerauno.
Sostropon av angular leter loima alamat in la tesais. Aurora prosta tentatas en urborus artemidos aiglas nais lucio rea diae pomplus omicran tequiclesco taste bon mongas oino bancon eurion mainadon homostolon elaste naegon agra opinoctero capitano timon te hoistan
Thank you so much for that, Helen, Maureen, and Alex. So we're now moving on to our next company, which is Out of Chaos. Before I do a brief introduction there, I just want to remind you as well to use the live Q&A to put any questions in there, and also to use the discussion forum. Apologies for the technical issues sorted out now. So, Out of Chaos. Well, I don't know where to start really. I've worked with Paul O'Mahony before, and we have Tabitha Gale as well with us tonight from Out of Chaos. Paul is one of these people with his finger in so many pies. Do check out his website, or the Out of Chaos website, as with the other companies tonight. Paul's work takes in theatre, education, and outreach, all combined in wonderfully imaginative ways. I personally can't wait for Delphi the Musical to be staged. And of course, there is the amazing achievement of reading Greek tragedy online, which has now clocked up over 40 readings and discussions, not only of tragedies, but also of comedies, fragmentary plays, and other classically inspired material. So there is a real treasure trove to discover there online if you've not seen that already. Tabitha I've met for the first time, briefly online this evening. She is a actor, writer, and poet, and Paul and Tabitha will tell you more. Over to you. Thanks.
Hello, hello everyone, and thank you very much, James. My name's Paul O'Mahony, and I'm coming to you from the south coast here in England. And Tabitha, where are you joining us from today, Tabitha?
I'm joining you from New York, right outside of Javits, where I will be getting my bag soon today. But it's great to be with everybody.
Well, that's great. We're proving it's 2021 with the vaccines, and Tabitha and I have been working together a lot over the last 12 months, and it's in connection with something that James just mentioned there, which is a project called Reading Greek Tragedy Online. And that is something that started just over a year ago now, when, as said for so many other companies, and as we've already heard there from Helen and Alex as well, sort of everything kind of turned upside down in terms of the preparation that people had and the plans they had for different arts projects. And I suddenly had 3 tours that were cut short, and was left kind of wondering what to do. And I reached out to the Centre for Hellenic Studies in Washington, DC, and proposed that we would read scenes from a different Greek tragedy every week, and bring together some actors from around the world and some academics, and we'd just try that for a few weeks and see what happened. We sort of got the first one up and running with about 24 hours notice, and then decided that we would carry on. And so we did, and we live streamed a reading and increasingly a performance of a tragedy every Wednesday for the last 40 weeks of last year. And these are all now freely available as an online resource on the Out of Chaos website and on the CHS YouTube page as well. We're going to talk a bit more about the project and how it developed and how I got to meet Tabitha and the work that she's done on this project. But we'll just now show just kind of a small glimpse of some of what we were doing. So we'll just play our first short video, please.
My destiny. From the start, you brought me forth to sorrow and suffering a very man never was. Even before I came into the light from my mother's womb, Apollo had declared to Laius that still unborn, I would become my father's murderer.
And that was Argyris Zafis playing Oedipus in Phoenician Women there. And Argyris is an absolutely brilliant actor who works at the National Theatre of Greece and had been performing in Epidavros last year when performances started again there. And he was one of over 120 artists who eventually became involved with this project. And as I was saying, things kind of grew quite quickly. And in terms of the core team, sort of kind of people kind of got involved really quickly and became absolutely sort of crucial for what we were doing. And Tabitha foremost amongst that as well. And so I'd just like to invite Tabitha now to talk a bit about sort of how things developed and how we went from staging a Helen back in last March with very little notice to the Helen that we most recently staged.
I first of all to comment that we have so many different people work on all these projects. In the been able to like make a global company to tell these stories with universal philosophical and moral themes. It's amazing. Yeah, I first joined all of this as an actor, getting to I think my first reading everyone was Ultra, and I think everything was still trying to find its way out of a standard, sit. We were trying to find ways to change the ad, and as the months went on and people made suggestions and we became more comfortable with the media Zoom, we've gotten to play more and more how Zoom is. It's not exactly film, but flexible used to make Zoom its own separate and to encompass these communities and all these huge events and that happen in play and make them still dynamic, just on a smaller and more intimate level. So I got to act to direct Medea last November, which was to directing over Zoom, and with all these willing participants just were willing to take like different sorts of like lights in their house and props, things to just truly explore and play over. And we made something cool. And then I got to direct Frag, which was an episode where we took a bunch of Greek fragments from Italy to the terrain and just together episode a through line of theme, which was gorgeous and amazing. And from there, our most recent one was actually Hell, which was fun to come back to after the initial episode, Paul and his small core group make, and explored and sort of taken it to a modern context. Spoken a lot, but I'll hand it back to Paul.
No, that's great. And I think one of the things that Tabitha sort of talked about, she coined the phrase Zoomcraft for what people were kind of trying to do in terms of making theatre over Zoom in response to not having any other choice at that time. And there was something fantastic about just taking whatever came to hand and making the most of it, and that everyone's living room became the stage, and it all became sort of just a way to sort of kind of democratize putting on plays. And what was really wonderful was that throughout every single play that we did always just seemed to have the most incredible resonance with what was going on in the world at that time. We sort of, just like Helen and Alex previously as well, we found obviously sort of Oedipus, sort of the starting point for Oedipus instantly put us in mind of the situation we were in, and also sort of the topics of leadership that came out of that as well. Then we happened to be doing the Eumenides whilst the count for the US election was ongoing. And there were numerous occasions throughout the year when it felt sort of like there had been inspired programming, when instead, actually, what it was just revealing was the enduring relevance of all of these plays and the amazing way that the artists who were involved were able to bring out those resonances. And just as a little example of some of the Zoomcraft that Tabitha was bringing to what we're doing, I'd like to now just play our second short clip, which is just a short scene from Rhesus.
It's my lady! Oh, Athena! Your voice! I hear it and I recognize it. You're always by my side, lady. Oh, always helping me, always there when I have some painful task to perform. Tell me, my goddess, where's this man, this Rhesus, set up his bed tonight?
Not far from here. He's placed away from all the others, from all the Trojans. Hector separated him from the rest, at least until day takes over from night. He's easy to find. White horses are harnessed to Thracian chariots next to him, and those horses shine like the wings of a swan, so you can see them in the dark. Kill their owner, and they're yours. To take home as spoils of war.
Diomedes, either you kill the soldiers, or you let me do that, while you take care of the horses.
No, I'll take care of the killing, and you take care of the horses. You're the one with the clever head, you know all the tricks.
Ah, I can see Paris Alexandros heading this way. He must have heard from a guard that there are enemy soldiers in their midst.
Well then, here's the man to slaughter.
Diomedes? No. Your strength does not surpass that of fate, and this man's fate declares that his death will not come by your hand, but by that belonging to someone else. Now run to the place where you are fated to slaughter someone else. I'll stay here and make this man, who is my own personal enemy, think that I am his friendly little goddess, Aphrodite, who's come to help him with his troubles.
Great, and that was Tabitha appearing there as Athena, and we also had Tim Delap and Eddie Miller, who were regulars throughout, and we were able to draw on a just amazing group of people who came together and created a real community for that. And then other people who were really significant, just without whom there was no way that any of it existed in the first place. Lana Coley at the Centre for Hellenic Studies was the person who sort of just, when sort of I first got in touch about this plan, just leapt on it and made it all possible, and was just inspired at bringing people on board, and in fact introducing Tabitha as well to the project as well. And Lana was the one who was approaching different academics, because the format for each episode was that we would present scenes, and then there would also be discussion between academics, but also with the actors as well, and a great opportunity for sort of the worlds of theatre and performance to come together. And the series host, well, actually, Tabitha, maybe you could tell us about the series host, because I think that's a special mention.
Christensen, who has been amazing, been carrying host since the very beginning, facilitated all the conversation between not only the scholars, but some of the activists that we've been able to bring on. As Paul said earlier, some of these actually still have, modern significance with a lot of the history in the past year. So Joel did an amazing job fielding, I think, a balance between, and it still is doing, fielding the balance between speaking in the historical context of, the ancient Greek context with the scholars and inviting the activists to speak on it in context.
Yeah, that's right. And I can only just echo that. Joel was just amazing and has been the host on every single episode that we've done. So we were running weekly last year, and we did 41 episodes in total because we decided to do an extra Saturday because we were gluttons for punishment. And we covered every extant tragedy. Every live stream was about 90 minutes in length with about 45 minutes worth of scenes and then 45 minutes worth of discussion. Sometimes they would go back and forth between them, or sometimes just run all the way through. And we started off with 4 actors reading bits of Helen at 24 hours notice, and then just on December the 23rd, when we did our final live stream of last year, we had a cast of 30 performing frogs with sections from loads of the tragedies that we'd come across over the year, and also original music and puppets. And it was sort of a real celebration of what we had done, because we were moving not just from sort of covering then all the tragedies, but we also created a 24-hour reading of the Odyssey that took place across 6 continents and in over 25 languages. And it was all part of sort of a plan that we had to kind of increase people's sort of ability to respond to what we were doing as well. So we also encouraged play reading groups that started up as sort of far afield as sort of Laramie, Wyoming. There's a group that's been reading tragedies monthly there since, and there's also a group that's just started up in Brasilia. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the other projects that we have coming up. But I'd just like to show one final short snippet. So Andy, if we can just play our 3rd video, that would be great.
Rage. Sing, goddess, that destructive rage of Achilles, Peleus' son, that rage that placed 10,000 pains upon the Achaeans, that sent so many strong souls of heroes down to Hades, that left their bodies as spoils for the dogs and all the birds. So that's how Zeus's plan played out.
And that was Lynn Kozak there, reading their beginning to the Iliad for an episode that we dedicated to that, as we sort of started to move away from simply looking at tragedies, but into other ancient texts, and we're continuing that now this year. So we've started again. We're going monthly rather than weekly, because weekly was killing me, and it also allows us more time for us to kind of dedicate to kind of creating something that is more thought through. And in this most recent version of Helen that happened last week, then we were able to invite activists on to talk about their response to issues raised by that. And we also have recently performed Thyestes by Seneca. We're going to be doing the Argonautica this month. We'll be doing our first bilingual performance in English and Spanish in May. And then in the latter half of the year, we'll also be doing another version of the Bacchae, which will be sort of lightly interactive, but with music and dance involved. We've got some great artists involved with that, and more fragment plays as well, as we sort of continue to explore sort of what the ensemble kind of brings to what we're doing. And Tabitha, I hope you can still kind of hear. I know the connections kind of coming and going, which is something that we're kind of used to as well, isn't it, in terms of what used to be our weekly gathering.
Yes, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah, I can definitely hear you. And I just kind of, it'd be great if you could just sort of talk briefly about sort of what your hopes are for kind of where the project goes from here.
I am actually excited by what we've been doing, formatting text and getting to exam and conversation after. I'm excited to more of a creative and artistic way of looking at these pieces. I mean, there's even to go. There's possibly further to go. Continuing to look at things in the context of how they translate to things we're dealing with today, and the people that we are in conversation with and live with today. Yeah, I'm very excited to continue pushing into that realm, and also to other mediums, as Paul talked about, other things, pipeline and different platforms.
Yeah, very definitely, and yeah, that sort of segues actually very nicely into talking about that we are now sort of going to be creating a podcast inspired by the series, and also a series of masterclasses, kind of looking more in depth at particular scenes in rehearsal and sort of the different interpretations that are available to actors and directors and academics, and those are all hopefully going to be coming by the end of this year. And we're also working on a participatory democracy event with UP projects, and I'll put the info about that into the discussion forum, and that's happening in May with scenes from Antigone, starring Tabitha. And one of the things that we've been doing as part of it as well is sort of running outreach alongside this. And kind of as an really important part, because we just wanted to try and include as many people as possible in this whole initiative. And so we created an event called Playing Medea, which initially ran in the US and Canada, and it was open to 14 to 18-year-olds. And it's then expanded into running in Greece and Italy. And here, thanks to the Classical Association's support, it has also been running here in the UK for the last few months, and students were invited to pick a scene from Medea and then film it in whatever way was possible at that time. And obviously they were under a lot of pressure because rules were changing all the time. But we had an amazing selection of entries, and across the whole sort of range of all of the competitions that we've had sort of over 100 videos being submitted, and we had some amazing entries here from the UK that Tabitha was helping to judge, and also Arlene Holmes Henderson was helping to judge as well. And just as I know that I've got to finish in a moment, but I'm just like to announce the winners of the UK competition. We had 3 runners-up, because there was such it was so impossible to choose between the brilliant options that were shown to us. So we have 3 runners-up who are Sam Eriksson, Ruby Rubacek, and Aisha Bajwa, all of whom have won £125, and also Unending Glory, of course. And there was one entry that sort of stood out a little bit more than those exceptional entries as well. And so I just want to say a huge well done and congratulations to Fortune Ibrahim and Mo Oselaja, who are the winners of Playing Medea. They will receive £250, and they will receive a trophy as well. More details will come soon with all of that. Please do check out all of the videos that we have online. Like I say, they're a free resource now, and you can use them in classroom. They're a great way for fueling further discussion about the plays and interpretation. Yeah, they're all on our website. And now that's really it from me and Tabitha. Thank you very much for having us here.
Hi, by my dog, who has now decided to go away, fortunately. Thank you, Paul, for that amazing rundown. I just can't recommend the website enough. That is such a treasure trove of stuff, as I said at the beginning. That Paul and Tabitha have done a fantastic job of explaining what they do, but it's just a rabbit hole of time you get lost in when you click on the website. Think, oh, we'll just have a look at some of the videos, and suddenly you realize that the whole morning or evening has passed. Thank you so much, you two, and yeah, prizes for the most glamorous location as well. What we all thought was a Zoom background is the real thing from Tabitha. Okay, so moving on to my last fanboy company, By Jove. Just a quick reminder before I start the introduction here about the question and answer and the discussion forum as well. I see that the people are using those. Fantastic, because we'll get on to questions in the nearish future. So yes, I'm really very excited about introducing By Jove. I was trying to figure out a way of encapsulating what they do, and then I saw the strapline on their website, which I'm going to use now, which is we take myths, pull them apart, and weave them back together for a contemporary audience. And I just can't tell you how well that works with By Jove Productions. I've had the pleasure of seeing a couple of productions of theirs, and the scripts, staging, music, and acting is really mind-blowing, and sort of involving and haunting in a really creative way. Like others in theatre, they have also had to go online this year, and at the Open University we were recently treated to an online Medea that they filmed, which was really something special. That was a very good evening. So we have a cast of thousands to introduce you to tonight. We have Christine Plasto, who is my colleague at the Open University and Associate Director of By Jove. We have David Bullen, who is Director, co-artistic director of By Jove, and will be familiar to people from other projects as well, such as the King's Greek play, which I know he was involved in a few years ago. He may well still be. S.J. Brady, writer, performer, co-artistic director of By Jove. And yes, I've seen her on stage as well, and also as one of our one of the three Medeas. And finally, I get to meet Wendy Haynes, who is a writer for By Jove. So without any further ado, I will hand you over to.
Thank you very much, James, and it's a real pleasure to be here at the CA and among such illustrious company in terms of making Greek theatre online. I think the other companies have just been doing fantastic things, so that I hope our offering will also match up to what you've already seen. So By Jove Theatre Company have been working together to make new work from old stories since 2011. And our work has always aimed to centre women's and LGBTQ+ people's voices, which are often missing from or misrepresented in theatrical receptions of myth, and in the worlds of classics and theatre more widely. Our very first project was a refocused Oresteia, which asked why the narrative's so-called resolution left so many women hanging. Clytemnestra unavenged, Electra unsatisfied, Iphigenia unremembered. In 2018, we began collaborating with Nancy Rabinowitz on a new engagement with the Oresteia and other myths around Orestes and his family, with a fresh question at the front of our minds. How could we positively explore a romantic and sexual relationship between Orestes and his companion Pylades, a relationship that is attested in both ancient sources and later receptions, without whitewashing their misogynistic act of violence against Clytemnestra or sidelining the other women in Orestes' family? Development of the project gathered speed in 2019, but our hopes of a performance in 2020 were dashed for obvious reasons. We changed gear, as so many other creative groups did, and as we've seen this evening. And we started to experiment with making theatre digitally, staging our live-streamed Medea that James mentioned, and also an audio drama of our reception of the Bacchae, Here She Comes. These both went up in summer 2020, and Here She Comes is still available to listen to on YouTube and SoundCloud until the 31st of July this year. These projects taught us a lot about what was possible with online theatre, not just theatre performed in a traditional way that happened to be broadcast online, but theatre that sought and celebrated the benefits and unique features of the online space. But Orestes and his family still demanded our attention, and the necessity of distance wasn't going away as rapidly as many of us had hoped. So we embraced it and began working towards the final product of our long residence in the house of Atreus. And so we present The Gentlest Work, a multidisciplinary online installation that celebrates the queer in myth, coming in late spring 2021. You'll be invited to witness the lives of Orestes, Pylades, Electra, and Iphigenia, to encounter queerness in ancient myth, and to join in the gentle work of recounting these stories in ways that find and celebrate queer joy amid, within, and despite the character's trauma. Audience members will navigate a different kind of narrative, finding their way among digital fragments of performance and expression. You'll discover the past and the present, fear and openness, permanence and ephemerality. The project is written, devised, imagined, dreamed, performed, and produced collaboratively by the company and our associated artists. It's also generously funded by the Institute for Classical Studies, the Hellenic Society, the Open University, the Society for Classical Studies, the Louis M. Rabinowitz Foundation, and Arts Council England. Tonight, we want to introduce you to some of the thinking behind The Gentlest Work and give you a flavour of the kind of material you'll encounter in it. These aren't finished segments of work, but should show you the kind of direction our writing has been going in. First, you'll hear the debut reading of This Is Where We Get Lost, a poem written and performed by Wendy Haynes. This poem responds to one of the first problems we encountered in beginning the project, the multiplicity of versions of the narrative around Orestes, which often contain conflicts and contradictions. In this way, the story, and indeed much ancient myth, is already existing outside of conventional narrative structures, and thus is ideally suited for our attempt to queer storytelling. Then you'll hear from David Bullen, one of the co-artistic directors of By Jove, who'll tell us more about the processes of uncovering or replacing queerness in this work. He'll also introduce the final reading by poet and performer S.J. Brady. So we hope that this glimpse into The Gentlest Work will make you want to see more. I'll put some links into the chat box for places to find out more information, including a mailing list you can sign up to in order to receive first access to tickets when they go live. For now, please enjoy this introduction to The Gentlest Work by Jove Theatre Company, beginning with our recording of This Is Where We Get Lost by Wendy Haynes.
Helen's beauty was famous, and this is where we get lost. She was taken, stolen, or perhaps went willingly away from the arms of her husband, Menelaus, the most powerful man in Sparta, to Troy. Across the sea in Troy, she was hated, for her theft or escape triggered the most bloody war any person could imagine. Agamemnon, recruited by Menelaus, offends the goddess Artemis by hunting one of her sacred deer. As punishment, Artemis stalls his warships and demands the sacrifice of his eldest daughter to return the winds. And this is where we get lost. Under guise of a wedding, Agamemnon leads his daughter Iphigenia to her death at the altar. Her mother, Clytemnestra, watches helplessly. Her daughter dies or is stolen by Artemis to a remote island to be her priestess. For decades, Clytemnestra brews her hate, taking a new lover and neglecting her living daughter, Electra. Her son, Orestes, is too young to understand. Agamemnon returns from war to his loving wife, drawing him a bath, and she proceeds to hack him gleefully to pieces in it. Electra, in terror, sends young Orestes away to be raised in Phaenote by King Strophius. And this is where we get lost. Electra waits patiently under her mother's thumb. Orestes befriends the king's son, Pylades. The god Apollo commands Orestes to avenge his father's murder, and so he travels with Pylades, or alone, to Sparta with a monstrous purpose. And this is where we get lost. Reunited with Electra, or perhaps not, Orestes murders his mother. He awakens the Furies, spirits of women's rage, and they pull him into a coma. They chase him across land. They're pissed off. And this is where we get lost. Orestes is tried by goddess Athena in a court, or it's all a show, a game for gods. Electra is married to Pylades, or she is not. They travel to an island to rescue their long-lost sister Iphigenia, unless they do not. In these woods, there is no map for what happens after. The childhood friends whose bond went beyond companions, the mother paying price after price for others' mistakes, the sisters both traded in marriage, denied a choice of lover, a goddess that may not see themselves as a goddess. Right between the pages and the pottery shelves, this is where we were lost.
Thanks, Wendy. It's well noted that Orestes and Pylades are an example of the motif in Greek myth of the devoted male companions. Sometimes that devotion is conceived of in romantic and or sexual terms, and sometimes it's not. We began this project by asking whether retellings of the myths Orestes and Pylades are part of, in which they are explicitly in a sexual relationship, whether that makes a difference to those retellings. Especially given the fact that their myths, certainly around the murder of Clytemnestra, don't really hinge on their devotion to one another in comparison to, say, Achilles and Patroclus in the Iliad. We worked on this in the way that we always do in the company. Everyone in the team developed responses to the myths based on their disciplinary background. So we were creating scenes, writing poems, generating musical motifs, improvisation scenarios, and choreographies. And we brought these together and worked on them as a group to find the commonalities and the differences. And we noticed two big things. Firstly, we noticed that when responding to Orestes and Pylades textually in the kind of written material we were putting out, we kept lifting them out of their ancient context and imagining them living in the modern world with identities that might, and I stress might here, be described as gay men. For those in the company who identify as queer, this seemed to be a relocation of our own queerness, in which Orestes and Pylades are attempting to kind of live their lives together or separately while contending with a background of trauma from earlier in their lives. Of course, none of us were dealing with the specific kind of trauma that these characters experience. I'm very grateful to say that none of us have killed our mothers. But what was revealing was this impulse to create a creative equivalent, to map a creative equivalence between Orestes and Pylades' intergenerational violence on the one hand, and the traumas often around coming out or our relationships to family that us as contemporary queer folk in the present negotiate on the other. Equally revealing was the way that this seemed to implicitly invite audiences to forgive or look past the heinous misogyny of what Euripides and Pylades do to Clytemnestra. And the second thing we noticed, actually, as we were working through this material, is that we were really struggling to pay attention to Orestes and Pylades themselves. At our first meeting in which we shared responses, we were struck by the fact that almost everyone in that meeting had written about Iphigenia, and actually we'd barely written about Orestes and Pylades at all. And following these impulses to kind of look beyond these two characters, we began to re-examine the possibilities of understanding Iphigenia and Electra through the lens of queer experience. For example, we began to think about Electra in terms of non-binary gender, looking at how Electra struggles with her assigned identity of woman and rethinking some of her desires to be just like Orestes. You'll hear more about that in a moment. Now, at the start of the project, we had this loose aim of wanting to offer what our collaborator Nancy Rabinowitz terms a gay-positive retelling of the myths in question. Now that we've kind of done a lot of work for a couple of years, we've kind of reached a point where we do want to narrate queer experiences through mythic characters and stories, but we also want to ask questions about what it means to do just that. What is at stake when configuring contemporary queer experience within the mythic experiences of these characters, which come with ancient social and political paradigms that are often difficult for us to process? Emblematic of this for us is what we call the Tumblr fame of 3 lines from Anne Carson's translation of Orestes that have in the recent past been widely circulated online as evidence of Greek myth and indeed ancient Greek culture being pro-gay in ways that the present is not. In these 3 lines, which you may very well be familiar with, Pylades says, "I'll look after you." Orestes responds with, "It's rotten work." And Pylades says, "Not to me, not if it's you," which is very sweet, very lovely. And you can see how this might be viewed alongside, for example, Madeline Miller's The Song of Achilles, to idealize a kind of queer devotion present within myth. But of course, what everyone in this room will know is that in the wider context of Euripides' play and the myth more broadly, this pair are dubious icons at best. Orestes is suffering because he has just committed murder, the murder of his own mother, and their support for one another in this play will lead them towards further violence. So the gentlest work seeks to address this not by telling one version of the story, or indeed telling the story at all in the Aristotelian sense, but rather inviting audiences to navigate a multitude of possibilities, possible narrative variants, possible ways in which these characters resonate with the present, possible ways of positioning themselves in relation to this story. This structure allows us to pursue the possibilities of reading Orestes and Pylades' desire for one another along the lines of contemporary sexual identities. But it also presents challenges to that idea. It offers a chance to pursue the wayward queer possibilities too of Iphigenia and Electra, and what it means to keep recounting the lives and traumas of this group with and without an awareness of queerness and of race and of class. To finish up our presentation then, we want to show you a preview of one fragment, another fragment of the piece. Though bear in mind that, again, as with Wendy's piece, this is not the finished and final thing. The text you'll hear will become the narration, we think, for a video collage that is just one amongst a multitude of fragments in the installation. The piece is written by, and also read here by, S.J. Brady. It explores Electra's disidentification with her gender that spills out for us from her narrative in Sophocles' play. Thanks for listening, and we hope you join us for the installation.
A winter sun showers me with the last of its love. My head is laid back, my eyes are unfocused. I see myself moving swiftly through shards of light, indistinct but bright, movement with purpose. In and out of focus, I let go of any conscious thought or expectation, an energetic pressure on my head firmly pushing back my neck. I could shed my body to be just like you, shedding like a snake, skin that leaves my soul free to run. If I were you, I wouldn't have to spend my life trying to match my brother in flight. In the eyes of my royal family name and birthright, it seems a daughter's work is never done. I purposefully engrave a callus in my hands, and I've bruised my fingers enough to swell. I've shaved my head. When she realized, she set fire to my hair and burnt the frame of my bed. If I could, I would cut out my womb, I tell her. She says, don't waste your energy. I clench my stomach muscles. I make sure I sit with my legs apart. My counsellor told me I might need to find other ways of gaining respect in my life. Sometimes I think I only know who I am when my eyes slide out of focus and a shape of me runs through the shaft of light, content, agile, a shadow of your light, a neutral movement where no one can see what I am, only guess what I might be. Even if our places were switched, and I got to grow up far away from this house, you remained here, having to live with them, I bet it would have been easier for you. Even if I had the space and time, allowed my own personal growth, distance from this place and this fucking family, even then, I bet no one would care. Just greeted with the same disdain I get now. I could have come home with an ally. I could have a friend who didn't want to leave my side. We had the same cheekbones, similar jawlines, dark, deep-set eyes, except mine are tired. I could run the same track as you, as any of them. I could strap myself in, only allow strength to run through my veins. Oversexed, oversized, high doses of probiotic protein shake, impressing people with the ultimate power of my thighs. I could push myself to the very limit, push myself so hard that I break through the skin, and who I am will erupt from beneath, until everything is gone. No discernible characteristics to signify what or who I am. just those deep-set eyes, set off by subtle bumps you could trace with the tips of your fingers across the shape of my skull. My blood, my heart, my bones, and me. Caress these colossal crates, grooves and tender-rounded edges of my head. I wanted to see what was underneath. I wanted to know what was left, once the swing of curls and dainty pointed ends of my hair were gone. What were they hiding? What were they trying to protect? You're more feminine than me anyway. The curve of your neck, so slender yet such strength. Strength you're allowed to show though, isn't it? It's all yours, so when it comes to me there isn't much left. Whose eye is it for? A shade of colour. She pinched my cheeks. To create some kind of depth, she said. For who? Whose gaze? What actual difference does it make? My counsellor also said they think I have blurred the lines between who I am and who Orestes is. They say I am projecting a persona onto him, and I have to understand that he might not be how I have painted him. I want him. I want what he has. I want to be him. I want what he is allowed to have. We are the same. Deep-set eyes. I am his twin. Just maybe in disguise. It had to be for you though, didn't it? You got the space, the speed, the strength, the hole you made in the heart of your mother because her son is gone and she wishes I was dead. I like it when I'm in the bath, in the semi-dark. The water is still and the edges of my limbs are exposed. Like I am not fully formed, but could disappear beneath the water and emerge, rebirth, reformed in a different way. I feel sick when I'm dressed, because I hate what it represents. I don't understand. Why can't I just be normal? Why can't I join in with the rest, playing games, running, shouting, laughing, at ease, fearless? Why am I never content? I could not care, she says. I could get on with my life, become somebody's wife. What a joke. I am no thing. I am no body. I am only fire. I have no subtle tones. All I know is this is not where I am. These should not be my bones. I am trapped. But who cares? I am only here to wait for you to come home.
Okay, so thank you so much for everybody's presentations. There's such a rich diet of stuff this evening. Just a couple of reminders. One is that you can still put some questions in the box using the live Q&A. And also please check out the discussion forum for links, because the various companies have been putting their links in to their material, and importantly as well to their sites where you can sign up for notifications and give them donations and things like that, which is always appreciated, I'm sure. Okay, we have a bit of time left for questions. One question that I was keen to ask those who have perhaps moved their practice online over the last 12 months or so, although it's a question really for Helen as well, given that she has also worked in the physical theatre. What are there particular lessons, are there things that you've learned in the last 12 months that you will then take back to your physical live theatre? Is there sort of a take-home point that you would have? I'll ask this to people in turn. Christine, I'll pick on you first as a By Jove representative.
Well, I'm not going to be the best person at By Jove to answer that question, being the least theatrically knowledgeable of us. So I think maybe that's one for David to take, if David wants to.
Perfect.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think Paul or Tabitha mentioned Zoomcraft as the kind of the word of the hour, and this is something I think companies across the world have been discovering in the last year, the kind of art of Zoomcraft, as we've all kind of scrabbled to. I know at least we have remembered those classes we had in college about filmmaking and convert our theatre making skills back into film. Yeah, it's been interesting. But one of the things that we've noticed is actually holding live events has been really key for us. Holding, even though it's kind of material that's been translated and originally was performed in a kind of theatrical setting, and we could have kind of pre-recorded, holding a kind of live event, having that kind of live moment where people can come together and join together and kind of share a moment of theatre has been crucial, for at least for us. I don't know how the others felt about that, but you know, having that experience still, even if everyone's kind of accepting that it's going to be translated and adapted. Does that make sense? Is that coherent in any way? I don't know if that is, but yeah, it's speaking to anyone else in their experience. But
can I pass that ball on to Paul now?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, I would echo that. There was something kind of really wonderful, really wonderful actually, about having a performance sort of, you know, 8 o'clock every evening on a Wednesday, and sort of having that sense of like actually you still get kind of butterflies and you still get the adrenaline afterwards. And we sort of a lot of the actors who were involved sort of said how helpful it was to have that, and actually what a release and a relief it was to kind of be able to express themselves in that way. And we'd often kind of stay on and have you know, we'd recreate the theatre bar afterwards and kind of talk about, you know, regale each other with stories and things like that. But I think in terms of like what we'd kind of want to kind of take out of all of this as well, there are kind of maybe two things. I think one thing that's really inspiring, and like seeing everything else that's going on sort of with everyone else's practice as well, it's amazing to see how people have adapted. And it's always interesting, I think, in theatre, that the more restrictions that you have, then the more inventive you have to be. And if you've only got sort of a light on your phone and a variety of ways of holding it, then what can you do? And actually, I think that's kind of been really amazing and really wonderful to return to and to bear in mind in terms of creating theatre. And the other thing is that I think that all of this work that's happening online or sort of via podcasts or in different formats to sort of live in-person theatre, it can all be kind of complementary to that live theatre as well. I think one of the things that's been really wonderful is that, you know, we've kind of filmed a load of different workshops, and like, so 5 minutes in 5 minute blocks, you could kind of have a workshop that would kind of like, you go off and do things and then come back, and then there's more to work with designers and with actors and with directors and things like that. And actually it's a great way then to really be able to take your practice to more people and to have kind of a clearer sense of outreach. Like very often when we're on tour, you kind of go, oh, we've got all these great workshops on offer, but by the time sort of people might be doing those workshops, you're already on to the next place that you're on tour anyway. That actually you can offer these things that are kind of in advance, during and after, that don't have to replace then doing things in person. That means that you can offer it much more widely to people and really kind of create a better access to all of these resources and all of these different sort of brilliant projects that people have going.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that's stunningly true, I think. Helen, I can ask you that question as well, or I can ask you another question. I've got too many questions for my time slot, but go on.
I mean, I think I've been really lucky because a lot of my theatre practice did manage to find other ways online. So like a children's show I was meant to make became an escape room, and a site-specific opera in dementia care homes became a web series, and Live Canon, which I run, have been hosting sort of weekly. So there's a sort of a joy and a creativity, I suppose, in that. But the real takeaway, I think, for me has been about audiences and access. And what we're finding now, particularly with the Live Canon series, which is every Friday lunchtime, is we're getting a lot of people saying, please don't stop it when live stuff starts up again, because either I'm on the other side of the world, or I'm a carer, or I can't get to. So I think it's allowed us to really think about what kind of theatre we want when we rebuild, I think, in some ways, and about really big questions about how people access work geographically and in terms of their needs in terms. So I hope that we'll continue to sort of take the best of what we've learned from moving stuff online in terms of those questions of accessibility and keep that going. I mean, all of us want to get back into theatres and make life work again, and miss the community of that and the collegiality of that and the ritual of that. But I think also we've discovered other ways to reach people which work for them in different ways, and I think that's quite exciting.
I have a specific question for you. Actually, I have two specific questions. One is a real fanboy question from somebody else you'll be pleased to know, which is about where they can find DVDs of the Greek plays from Cambridge, but you can put that in the chat box. The question I will ask you live is where you get your actors from. So the question was whether these are people who are classicists, whether they're actors who you train to do things phonetically, how you select them and how you train them to speak ancient Greek.
That's part of the joy, is introducing brilliant actors to 2,000-year-old text. So a few of the actors we've worked with have been classicists and most haven't. And for example, that first clip in the highlights reel of the Watchman on the roof, that actor met ancient Greek for the first time a week before we started shooting. And gives the most unbelievable inhabited performance of that language. You know, I think I've seen that tends to be the comment on that film. So no, we teach people Greek, and that is a joyous and a wonderful thing to do. And it depends on them and their creative practice how we approach that. So we tend to, if people are brilliant musicians, we often go phonetically because they're quite used to picking up stuff in lots of different languages by ear. If they're quite confident linguists, we might go in by teaching them the language. We might do a mixture of those things, and we often use rehearsal techniques that allow people to start to play the text, maybe a technique like actioning or something like that, so they can start to feel where the beats of the text are before they can get their mouth around the sounds within it. So sometimes we sort of scaffold up their performance through their process till the point where they can say the lines. So it depends a bit on who it is and how we're working with them and how we're going to film it and what the requirement is going to be for them on set, whether they're going to have to be able to deliver it all, whether they're going to be able to do it piece by piece. The choral work we've done, because it's quite singing-led, we've often worked phonetically with scores that have the Greek and phonetic stuff on as well. And we also sometimes use a very interesting form of substitution where we teach people the meter before we teach them the language, so they know the rhythm and the shape of what they're doing. So, for example, the almost nobody who you saw in the new Oedipus film today knew any Greek. Mm-hmm. And so in those Zoom sessions, the first thing we did was to make sure that they could do the meter of that Oedipus strophe, which is 8 bicycles and a ride, and 6 bicycles and a ride, as in bicycle, 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 and so on. So Alex Silverman is the guru of that. So I'm going to pass over to him briefly, because he is the man who can quite frankly get anybody speaking or singing in Greek within about 25 minutes of meeting them. And I've seen it work in remarkable circumstances.
Go on then, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, Helen's touched a lot of the bases there. Substitution, as we call it, it's not rocket science, but I find that introducing people to the text through the rhythm is really often the best way to do it, and making it as silly as possible, stopping them thinking about what they're actually saying and just thinking about how to say it is quite often is the most important thing. And it makes very little difference whether people know Greek, actually, because you can have learned Greek since the early 1850s. And what I really need is a group of people in a room that will say things that sound the same in order for us to be able to make it mean anything and to be able to sound good. So knowing Greek is helpful, but it doesn't get you all the way. So actually, after about 25 minutes of rehearsal, you're pretty much on a level playing field anyway. With the guys who sang in the chorus that you saw, so we spent 1 hour in total rehearsing the singers for that film. I spent about 5 to 6 minutes introducing them to the sounds I wanted them to make, and quite a lot of time making silly rhythmical noises, so they had an idea of what was required. To some extent, they were able to copy what we do, but I mean, the real answer to that is anybody can do it. You can throw any amount of different techniques at doing it, and you really don't need to be a classicist. In fact, the best results we always get are from people who discover it and find it a way into that language to express themselves. The language works really as a sort of as a mask of sorts. It's a really freeing, really liberating tool because you can immerse yourself in it and use it to find ways of expressing yourself that you didn't know and that don't rely on things that you've already done. So musically and expressively, it's hugely liberating, I think, to sing, especially to sing in ancient Greek, and especially if you haven't learned it.
Thank you so much. I've got so many questions I want to ask, but I'm noticing that the time is nearly 8:30. One of the comments that Paul made really resonated with me about how you're finding new things in classical texts. You know, when you're interested in the academic discipline of reception studies, you're educated to think about how different cultural periods reacted to different texts, and suddenly there's been this huge cultural shift. And so I'm reading things again with such fresh eyes. I'm working on my sister at the moment, and you see the play and the culture in such a different way. But that is a subject perhaps to explore for another time, or something to go away and think about over that much deserved drink. I'm going to take a lot of this away with me. I'm going to take the phrase Zoomcraft into my everyday life. I'm also going to take the phrase recreating the theatre bar into my everyday life. And more than that, I think in 1 minute's time, I'm going to be there myself. Thank you so much for everybody for giving up your time. I know evenings are inconvenient for all kinds of reasons. We wanted to have sessions at different times of the day to suit different people, and also the evening somehow suited an event about theatre. But thank you so much, guys. Do go and grab that well-deserved drink, albeit not in a theatre bar. And yeah, please do check out the links for the various companies as well, and explore some of the fantastic work that all of you have been doing. So thank you so much, and good evening to you all. And those hardened conference attendees, we shall see you again tomorrow morning for a session on outreach and CA branches. Okay, all right. Bye, and thanks again. Night.